Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the Python Community News, where we talk about the news and happenings all around the Python community. I am one of your hosts, Jay,
I'm John.
and we got an interesting show. We've got a lot of community things happening around us. You may have noticed we weren't here last week. Unfortunately, weather and illness that plays a big role in whether or not you can actually get up and get on camera and talk. A lot of things. But John, how have you been the last couple of weeks?
I've been good. There's been, it's a busy time of year, and I think there are a couple of super interesting Python topics that come about, around this time every year.
Yeah, and if you want to catch those topics, be sure to be following us on our website, pythoncommunitynews.com. We've got two really good topics this week. John, I don't know. I don't think we're going to really have time to talk about all the other stuff that happened over the last 2 weeks. These are kind of the two big ones. Maybe we just tell people, hey, subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to all the other things, and you'll hear about them there. Um, but do you want to go first with your topic, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was that there is a fundraising drive going on. So the Python Software Foundation runs a fundraising and membership drive. I think they do one of these more than once a year, but the winter one tends to be kind of a big focus, in part because a lot of people's uh, budgets are kind of wrapping up around this time of year, and especially with the PSF being a 501c3, right? You get into things like charitable donation budgets and all of this other stuff. But the long and short of it is that the PSF is running a drive right now, asking people to do two things. One is to support the PSF financially, right? And you could do this a few different ways, but the sort of biggest um, direct impact one is going to be to donate, and whether that's your own individual funds, or if you work at a company that supports organizations like this, corporate donations as well. And then the other is actually becoming a member of the Python Software Foundation, um, which there are a bunch of different kinds of membership. The one that's most relevant here is the supporting member, which is the membership class that is tied to, right. If you do make regular financial donations to the PSF, um, you get yourself added to the membership roster, which comes with a bunch of things. The kind of main one, though, is the ability to vote in Python Software Foundation board elections.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really, I like about this is one, you have other communities. Shout out to PyCharm. Um, I think every year we see how involved they are doing their annual survey. They're giving away a license, so like, hey, maybe now is like if that's a thing that you want to choose, you want to go down that software path and like do it around this time. That way, you know that like your license goes into also supporting the PSF. You also get some good discounts on it as well. But you kind of hit the nail on the head with that. It's not just that like, oh hey, I'm a member, I'm giving money. It's I'm a member, I'm giving money, and I get things back that actively support the Python community. Like they talk about it kind of in the little slide in the page here. You have like PyCon US, the developer in residence program, actually having people on staff to look after the Python community, the infrastructure that goes into it all. Like your $100 that you give goes towards that, and that's kind of the minimum I think you can give for the supporting membership thing. But like, think about how much money people make and think about all these things that you can do. Like, do those things because it keeps like all of these things running smoothly.
There are a handful of different kind of specific initiatives that they highlight here in this fundraising announcement, but the PSF does quite a bit. Right, the biggest one that people know of, and is probably the most visible, is right. They're the organization that makes PyCon US possible. Right, PyCon US is a big event, and we've talked about it a bunch of times. Right, the call for proposals is open, and it's almost a year round kind of topic, just because of how involved it all is. And obviously for the people behind the scenes, it's more than a year round commitment. Um, but if you've ever been to a Python related event, there's a really good chance the Python Software Foundation has been um, kind of involved in making that happen in one way or another. Right? They provide grants to other organizations. There are benefits like the fiscal sponsorship program. So if you run an event, or an open source project, right, you can get some of the benefits of being right under a 501c3 without having to do all of that legal work yourself. Um, I could go on and on. Right, the PSF is a really impactful organization. Uh, Kind of obviously from its name in the Python community. And yeah, there are a bunch of ways right now to make your dollars go further, right? If you're interested in supporting them, a really big one, I mentioned before. If you work for a company that uses Python, um, if they have a charitable giving initiative, or if they do, a lot of companies do these things like they will match to some cap, um, charitable donations that their employees make. You can double the impact of your donation here. Or right, if you're going to buy PyCharm anyway, like you said, do it around this time. Now you can have the added bonus of supporting the PSF.
Yeah, and I always forget about that like donation matching thing of like, oh hey, if you go through the process, you can turn your $100 donation into a $200 donation, and it still only costs you $100. Like that's great. The other side of that is, I'm going to talk directly to the audience of like, hi, um, I've been to one PyCon in my career, and it was fantastic and phenomenal, and I can't wait to go again next year. It is not cheap for people to go to PyCon, and many people are only able to go because their employers will pay for them to go. That being said, I know of people who got their first job because they went to PyCon. I know of people who got their first job because they went to some other conference. I know of people whose first time ever getting on stage and giving a lightning talk was because someone gave them the encouragement to sign up and do that thing at PyCon. That is career changing for a lot of people. That is more career changing than sending a tweet or any of those things. So if you want to support more people doing that, your money, your donation actually goes in some ways towards providing those sponsorships and scholarships to attend some of these events. My first conference, well, my second conference that I ever went to, I only had to pay for my conference ticket. My flight and my hotel were covered. And the only reason I was able to do that was because not not due to the sponsorships of the event, but due to the sponsorships of the PSF, who were then also providing those grants to that smaller conference. So like when you invest that little bit of money, sure, it goes to all of those things, but it might down the road go and impact somebody attending their first conference, not even in Salt Lake City or, wherever the next PyCon or, DjangoCon is being held. It could be their smaller conference. It could be their meetup. It could be the difference in like a meetup having funding to have a Zoom room or a Discord or whatever. I'm a part of the San Diego Python community. We do like I'm an organizer there, and like we have a live stream that we set up. We have, a Discord channel, and we have like actual equipment. And a part of that is a lot of the concerns that we have are covered by the PSF. So like we have a budget. We have like there's a bank account. I don't have access to any of that stuff, but like it exists. And like that's how we're able to sit there and have conversations and say, we want to make our meetups more accessible, our conferences more accessible. And the only way we're able to do that is because we have people at the PSF that are also pitching in and helping out, with some of the other things. We had a really good conversation about trademark enforcement, which I know that sounds like the most entertaining topic ever. But stuff like that matters. And if you don't do it, then you get more issues down the road. Ask the CEO of Twitter right now about people impersonating and using things that they probably shouldn't do. But like I say all of that to say that like the donation that you give isn't necessarily like just going to PyCon. It's not just going into someone's salary. It's going to build a better, stronger community, and like that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, so I've organized a good number of events, conferences and meetups, and I've been on the receiving side of grants from the Python Software Foundation a number of times for things like right wanting to bring live captioning to a conference, right? That's a cost you have to commit to upfront, and it's rightfully not not like a rounding error cost. It's skilled labor doing difficult captioning work with like super jargony conference talks, and so a lot of the time having these sorts of grants programs available lets a conference push their offering a little further, right? And grow each year, as opposed to not knowing, well, are we going to get all of the sponsorships we're expecting?
Yeah. And I mean, also, I mean, we talked about this a little bit a few episodes ago with, kind of doing the DjangoCon recap and things like that. But when conferences started going back in person, one of the things that they realized was that to do that, you had to then say, okay, how do we create the accessibility of being able to be online and have anybody visit, anybody attend, regardless of where you live. And what happened was the cost actually went up. So like giving a virtual conference when you're not giving an in-person conference is, I'm not going to say cheap, but it can be done in many different ways. Giving an in-person conference and adding that virtual component to it is incredibly expensive and incredibly hard. It is a difficult task that you don't necessarily need developers to do this. You need video staff. Like DjangoCon had video staff on hand. They had captioners on hand. And all of these things had to work together, and like they have to coordinate with the hotel and things like that. So then when you're doing all of those things, like the cost of operating a healthy, accessible conference is now more expensive than it ever has been before, because and I mean, these are good problems to have because we're making the community more accessible, but that doesn't mean that just because it's a good thing to do that it's cheap. Like, usually most of the good things to do are usually not cheap. I think by design.
Yeah, I mean you're it's not quite two conferences, but it's closer to running two conferences than it is to running one, right? You're people throw around this term, right? Hybrid conference, and some use it to mean, right, we're doing our normal conference and we also have a live stream, like that's the whole thing. But if you're really uh, doing it right, the way I would think is the right way to do it, um, you're building a full fledged online experience, in addition to the in person one, that is a little more familiar to a lot of organizers already. And I mean, more than anything, that it's right. That's a really like labor intensive process. There are a lot of people involved, and doing this uh, basically twice, doesn't make it any easier. So, uh, yeah, having like grants programs and things like that available uh, to organizers is super useful for. I mean, even just for the concept. I've talked about this with a bunch of conference organizers on various occasions, but like often you end up in this position of you have deposits you need to put down before you've been able to sell tickets, before you've been able to sign sponsors, right? There are um, there ends up being this window of like you owe people money before anyone owes you money, and uh, those grants programs and other kinds of financial support are hugely useful, especially for right smaller events, with uh, like primarily volunteer staff, where you don't want to have people putting this on their personal credit cards.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like, kind of my closing thought on this is just the the Python community is historically known for how do we how do we stand out from every other language. Like, I don't think that the language itself is 100% the reason for Python's like exponential growth. Uh, the language is a good language. I mean, that's why we're all here. We all enjoy writing Python. Like, that is a good thing. There's actually a really popular quote from Brett Cannon, who's long term Python community member, that says, "I came for the language, but I stayed for the community." So for me, like, the the way that continues to happen is that we continue to invest in that community. I know, like, right now, there's a whole lot of conversation around where communities live, where people talk, where people congregate, where they do all those things. I'm completely amazed at how wonderful the Python community was for me when I felt like an outsider, like, looking in. And now I feel like an insider looking in and being like, oh no, this is still great. Like, I'm glad that, like, I have the privilege to be able to go to Salt Lake City, or I mean, I live in San Diego, but like San Diego for Django Con. And like, when I see these people here and I get to interact with them, I know that in part that is because of all the effort that has been put in to make a community that's worth doing more than just reading the blog posts and going on Stack Overflow and writing the code and going to the end of the day. Like, the conversations I have with people in the community are absolutely valuable. They are like life valuable. And the PSF has in many ways worked to create more spaces for those types of conversations. So I'm thankful to them. So like again, I'm just one person. If that's what it takes to encourage you to say like, hey, $100, or as John's been saying, like have your company pay for this. Like make sure that they're sponsoring too. Make sure they're giving as much as possible to support this, especially if your company runs off of Python. If Python is like the key, is like a foundational piece of what you're doing to make money, continue to invest in it because that will only come back to you. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, John.
Yeah, we got a good question in the chat here from Kojo. What is the reason for the exponential growth of the language there? So I don't know if you want to rehash some
Everything,
of what you said.
yeah, no, everything that I threw out there. I mean, when you think of exponential growth, like we talk about this. I mean, John, you and I talk about this. Like I'm at least I'm a content creator. Like that is my job. Like my job is to be thinking about how I can reach the most people, hopefully for the least amount of money and effort. That's how my boss likes to, we measure those things. But some things aren't. Things usually don't happen because they were orchestrated. They happen because a lot of pieces fell together, and it kind of made sense. But to me, when I think of the Python community and like growth, like it's growth that, in my opinion, I think scares a lot of developers. Like we talk about how easy the language is to do. We talk about how people can go and not be a developer, quote unquote, and still like get their job done and build things using Python. Like when we talk about, Python code helped James Webb Space Telescope take pictures of the universe like never before. And I'm sure that there are other languages out there that contributed. Like I know that there are other languages out there that contributed. But what you hear is the Python side of it. What you hear are, data scientists, or not even data scientists, actual scientists, physicists, and like mathematicians and things like that, learning Python so that they can expand their knowledge. And because of that, what we've seen are concerns for the community that go beyond I'm a Django developer, or I'm a backend developer, or I do this one space. Like you have teachers that are like, I have to teach Python now. How do I do that? Or you have, again, scientists, mathematicians that are like, we have to care about that community. I watch people work on a digital like ham radio and like figure out how to do all of that. And they were sharing how like Python has made a community that started with Morse code, like be able to expand and create ways to communicate with each other, and revolutionize something that's been happening for centuries. Like when you see that happening, that I only hear Python. Sometimes I hear Rust, but I mostly hear Python, like in the discussion for that space. But with that, you now have significantly more people that you have to manage and care for and think about and care about, and that changes the landscape of how you promote those events. That PyCon can't just be about let's talk about this new module of the week or whatever. Like you need a track for data scientists, you need a track for hardware. You like it becomes a little bit more complicated. And the only way that they do that is with support. And it's like, I don't think that the hockey stick goes together in terms of like financial support and popularity. I think popularity shoots way up, and then like the financial support kind of keeps going on its little path. So the exponential growth is a thing that happens because of convenience. But the reason why it's not like oh, hey, it grew and then it disappeared is because people find the language and they find the things that make the language beneficial for them, both professionally and, personally.
Yeah, and so I mean, we talked about um, the PyCharm part of it, and the direct donation part of it, but I do want to also bring up the become a member aspect, right? So this is the uh, if you're going to donate $100 and you plan on donating this $100 every year, right? That's kind of the core of what the supporting member requirements are. And to be a member of the Python Software Foundation, um, there's not like a huge amount to it, but there is a pretty important part, which is the ability to vote in board elections, right? And so I think we talked about a while back on the show the board elections and the numbers of people who did vote in these, and it was on the order of 5 to 600 voters out of 15 to 600, 1,600 eligible voters, something in that ballpark. Um, and for a community the size of Python's, I think that's pretty small. And if you are right out there and you're saying to yourself, well, why doesn't Python prioritize X? Right? You've got a particular thing that you think needs to have more investment in it. That's one way you can get involved, right? I mean, voting is sort of the lowest bar there of um, if nothing else, you can go and you can cast your vote for that candidate that says, hey, this is a thing that's really important to me. The PSF should be doing more in this particular niche. And if you're not already a voting member, because there are a number of ways you can become one, this is a good opportunity for it, right? It's I want to say it's $99 um, to become a supporting member, and that's like a yearly contribution. So not a uh, it's not a large commitment for a lot of folks who do write Python professionally, at least in the context of like the the U.S. and tech salaries here, and there's a lot more to be said about that, but you know
that's
uh,
that's a longer conversation.
yeah, and if I'll also say, right, because I don't want to leave this out, right? If you do work to support, right, Python, the Python community, or various Python communities already, there is another membership type that uh, you can register for, that gets you the same kind of voting privileges without a financial donation, right? So if you organize events, if you maintain Python packages that are open source, um, if you work on right news shows like this, there those all kind of go into um, uh, into the umbrella of like contributing memberships, um, and there's again a pretty low bar of like um, it's like 5 hours a month. If you're running a meetup, right, Jay, this, it's like that's a meetup a month, and you've more than met that goal, right?
Definitely. Which, I mean, speaking of voting, you should vote for our segues, but you should also, if you're in the Django community, you should vote for the DSF board seat as well. And I'm gonna take your adamant proposal to get out there and vote as a good topic change, because the DSF is actually they're having their board candidates now. I'm not sure when the time to actually go vote on this is, John. Do you know by any chance?
I do not. I saw that so when the Django Software Foundation posted the list of candidates, um, I didn't see specific timelines,
Hmm.
which is uh, maybe something that I just missed, or it's posted to right a place that's not quite as public as the blog post. But sooner's better than later. I can say
Yeah,
that.
definitely. So yeah, like one thing that I wanted to talk about, obviously we're talking about like there is the board that's, you know, there are a lot of people running. And I think that this is great. Like four people are stepping down and there are so many positions open or so many people running. There's almost 20 people running. They're being represented. They're representing like I think 10 countries if I counted correctly. One covering I think every major continent: North America, South America, Australia, Asia. Uh, this is, in my opinion, just a showcase of how diverse this small piece of the community is, and I think that's amazing. But really quick, I'm glad we have some people in the chat that knows. The election is now open, so you can actually vote, and it will stay open until the 28th of November. So be sure to, like I said, if you're someone that can vote in this, please go ahead and vote. But John, I wanted to, and we kind of hinted at this. I wanted to talk more about the diversity geographically of these board positions because we saw this even with the PSF last year. Um, there was like how many people ran for the PSF? I mean I believe it was like almost as many people that are running for this.
I want to say it was somewhere on the order of like 23, 25.
Yeah. So like
Um,
and there were what, four seats or three seats available? Like
I think there were four available for the Python Software Foundation board there.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean it was and I mean a ton of great candidates who uh, I know many of by name and at least a couple personally. And these are all people who are already doing uh, really great work within the Python community, and I think um, you'll see a lot of that mirrored here with the DSF board too.
Yeah, and this is interesting for me because I'm still relatively new to the Django community. Um, I attended my first Django Con this year. I spoke there, and that was a great experience. But the nice thing about that is I got to meet a lot of the people that are on this list, which tells me like a couple of good things. One, it tells me that the people that are actually running like are in the community, like they are a part of the community. And if we looked at some of the actual pieces, everyone here made a statement about why they thought that they would best serve on this board. But what interested me the most about this was that Django is the second most popular web framework according to the PSF survey. It is massive. The community is amazing. The organization, DEFNA, the Django Events, Foundation of North America, does a lot to not only drive the the Django community, but the greater Python community. A lot of the stuff that they do winds up getting adopted into, you know, other organizations, other areas of the community. It's so heartwarming to see a group and a segment of Python that is so passionate and does want to see the community like continue to be driven forward.
I do want to, since you brought up DEFNA, I want to make sure that all the listeners know that the Django Software Foundation and the Django Events Foundation of North America, well, definitely related in the sense that they both work on Django things. Um, what these board nominations are for is the Django Software Foundation,
Right, 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 right.
and the DEFNA board. Um, I want to say has a schedule that's a couple of months offset from the Django Software Foundation board. So if you are interested in, right, I can't find a blog post for it at the moment, so maybe it's not up yet. But if you're interested more on the event side of things, I think keep an eye out for news about DEFNA coming out, in the coming months. But if you're interested in um, the technical aspects and the foundation aspects of um, what it takes to keep a project like Django, uh, both up and running and evolving to suit its community best. Um, the DSF board is really um, very much the place you can make your voice heard when voting.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier, in another show where like, they do the survey, like, and the survey is what helps drive some of the changes in the Django like community. Uh, these are the people that that make that change happen. These are the people that like take that survey and go, oh, we can go and do things with the, such and such wants this to happen. How do we go about making that happen? Okay, well, I'm the treasurer, so it's my job to make sure that the financials are in order for that to happen. Or I'm, one of the engineers, or I'm the president, so let's let's talk about how we can reach out there. Like these are the people that you're selecting. You're selecting the decision makers that are going to take that information and do something with it. And I mean, again, like I feel great because like I'm seeing names of people that I just got to meet. So like I'm happy because I'm like, oh yeah, if that person won, like I know that they would be responsible. But I also want to highlight again, there's that geographic diversity as well. I think that this is a topic that uh, maybe some folks from the PSF have heard me talk about before, where when we talk about the concerns of the Python community, there are kind of two. One is, where is the funding coming from? And I work for a public company. I mean, I work for Microsoft. Microsoft is a visionary sponsor of the PSF and things like that, which means that they donate a lot of money. But there are also people that work at Microsoft that are a part of putting Python together, not just as a core developer side, but also from a like the PSF side, the organizational side as well. Same for Google, same for, well, I think Meta still. Um, a lot of people are not excited when you have representatives from, not only just the five largest companies in the world, but also like the five largest companies in the world isolated or like, congregated in like these two states in the United States. And a lot of the decisions are then affected by what's happening in those areas. So all that to say, like, I'm not only excited by the number of people that are running, but I'm excited that we have people representing Africa, we have people representing South America, people that are representing Europe and Southeast Asia and Australia. Like, by having a more diverse board, then what you're also doing is you're not allowing the concerns, the issues only come from one point of view. And to me, that's why I'm excited not only about this, but the PSF. While I think that there's still a lot of work to do, the one thing that we saw was there was a larger spread of people running, and I think that we have to do the thing that or I guess not do the thing that I did immediately, which was look for the names of people that I recognized, but also read the statements and understand why people are running and what they hope to bring, and also think about the perspectives that they bring from wherever in the world they're coming from.
Yeah. So I think, Jay, if you expand any one of these with the arrow there, just to be kind of prescriptive here, um, if you're eligible to vote in this election, right? Step one is going and expanding every one of those arrows and reading the board statements here, right? Because like you said, it's just voting for the name you recognize is not necessarily going to result in what is the best for the community as a whole, right? There are people, right? Everybody here put time and effort into sharing, right, why they want to run for the board, why they want to support the community in this way, and right, I know, right, it's not as fast as just like going and checking a few boxes because you recognize people's names, but again, it's not a lot of effort to sit down and read through these statements, and really understand, right, why you're voting for the people you're voting for.
I would almost encourage you, like, find the names of people that you don't know, read their statements. Then, like, if they're on social media and you can find them on social media, then, like, understand, like, their impact, understand what they've been doing, how they've been engaging in their community. That's one of the things that I struggle with the most, is that I can only have the perspective of things that, you know, that interest me. But you have to think beyond that. And to me, actually, the sign of someone who is very good at, serving on a board is they put the interest of all of the people that they represent in mind. They don't think about, for me, I'm just a tinkerer and web developer. So, like, I'm going to, of course, want all the web development, interests and things like that. But I'm also an advocate in the community. So now, like, I've already got my lens. I think if you can find people that hit your lens in some way, then that's great. But also make sure that you're selecting people that cover your blind spots as well. Because I've been in positions before where I feel like everybody was getting attention or everybody was getting helped. And I was like, well, what about me? What about this island of misfit toys that doesn't ever get addressed? And, like, I think that the more spread out the concerns are, then the more well-rounded and the more covered these, the concerns of the greater community will be. And we also have a good example. There's a blog post that explains what DSF board members do. Thank you, Kojo. So yeah, if you're curious of the work, what are they going to be doing in this role? If someone is running for treasurer, do they have experience, as a treasurer? Not necessarily required, but sometimes that's good. If you have someone that's like, hey, I've served as a treasurer for successful nonprofits or other organizations. We talk about this all the time. We're like, the PSF is hiring an events coordinator. I don't think the thing on the resume that makes someone the most qualified is how long they've been doing Python things. It's like, do you have experience in like planning events? I think when you're on the board serving the community, regardless of how, there is, I guess there is something to say about like their overall experience in the community or their overall time in the community, but also do they have like special skill sets that might make them a good candidate to serve as, a board president or a board vice president or secretary. It's again, there's more to think about than like I've seen this person give a talk on Django admin, so like therefore they would be a great president. Like I don't think the two are necessarily related.
Well, so there's that aspect of it, and also, I mean, this is less common, but there are, um, right. I've seen people run for positions in other circumstances where, um, right, their goals are just not in line with what a board aims to be, and so you want to vote with that context as well. And I'm not saying that that is anyone in uh, this group of candidates by any means, but it's another reason why why I say go and read every one of those statements, because um, just because you recognize uh, uh, someone's name doesn't mean that right they're uh, putting right the same kind of uh, emphasis on areas that you want to see the board work toward, right? And uh, right, what the board does today may be different from what the board does next year, but ultimately that's going to be a product of these elections, and uh, these things will change over time, and if you're particularly passionate about um, you know types of actions that the board does, like you know they they uh they give out, I'm blanking on the name for this. They have an award, that they a prize, that is it, the Malcolm Trednick prize, that they award every year, right? If you're particularly passionate about, right, wanting to see, um, for example, more emphasis put on that kind of like recognizing individuals within the community, right? This is your chance to find, right, who's actually doing um, this sort of work, and pushing for it. And I said this about the Python Software Foundation when the elections were happening earlier this year. And say it about the DSF as well, right? Everybody on this list is already contributing to the community, right? And you know, 99% of the time, regardless of the results of this election, they're going to continue doing that. Right? These people are not volunteering their time and energy to boards like these, um, because they're not already deeply invested in a community.
That
You
they
know
also
that
don't get paid. So like there isn't
Sure.
there isn't a financial benefit. So the people that are doing this, don't I wouldn't assume that like, you know, for much of them, I think there was one in there that even said like, hey, disclosure, I work for this company. It's my job to, you know, care about the Django community. If I'm not elected, I still have to care about the Django community. Like,
Yeah, I
so
mean that's what I'm getting at is, these are not elections that are going to be attracting a bunch of candidates who are just looking for a title, right? These are people who are a lot of the time already doing the same kind of work they want to continue doing, and are looking to, you further leverage what they can in the community here.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to sway anybody's opinion, but like there are literally people who help develop the framework itself that understand that it's grown beyond that, and they want to see that community that they put a lot of time and effort and energy into. They want to see that continue to grow and to continue to expand. And I think that that's like one that's super noble, but it's also like it's super important to see that like I don't know how I would be if like something that I made got to that level where it was like it has to go beyond me as the person. And this is where I give like all props to the Django community at large, because they're just that kind, those kinds of folks, the people that will like make a thing and be like, hey, this thing is bigger than what I am, so therefore I'm giving it, but I want to see and do the things that are going to be in the best interest of the framework and of the community and the people that make up that community. Well, John, I think we're as we're getting closer to wrapping up the show, we got a couple of conferences that are coming up, including one that was submitted by one of the organizers, Pytexas. The site is live. Shout out to the conference chair, Mason. I think he's also the Texas Pytexas like organization president as well. But that's going to be April 1st and 2nd. The CFP is open, so get out there. Also, I know that they are looking for sponsors as well. So if you're interested or your company is interested in sponsoring a local event, maybe you're in the Texas area, then yeah, check that out. And again, thank you, Mason, for bringing that to our attention. And you can also bring conferences like this to our attention by going to our GitHub repo and submitting a topic. We tend to prefer the topics that you bring to us because we know that they're topics that the community wants to hear about because they brought them. But John, we have a couple of other conferences as well. Do you want to talk about
Yeah, so PyCascades, I think are planning on announcing the specific dates and venues soon. But it's going to be in Vancouver. It's going to be in 2023. It's typically. Oh, they have announced the dates. I missed
Yes.
that. That is very exciting. So March 18th and 19th, 2023. The call for proposals is open. Do we have the link to the CFP here?
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of detail about the kind of talks they accept and all the right nitty gritty details of format and what they're looking for in a written proposal. But yeah, if you're interested in speaking in Vancouver in March, which should be a super fun event to travel to. Definitely head that way, and I'm sure if they have all those details up, they probably have a link to their sponsorship information as well.
Yeah. And there is another event. I'm going to actually save it for next week because I think their website isn't up yet. But the PyCon Philippines also announced that they're doing their next event. Website's still in progress, but hopefully we'll have more information like that to share in the near future. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. We do have some PCN news. We are not meeting next week. John and I are both in the United States. There's a national holiday happening. We both plan on eating lots of food, and we might still be asleep, by the regular time. But no, I'm not going to be available. I'm spending time with family, and I'm pretty sure John's going to be doing something similar. So we're not going to have an episode next week, but we are working behind the scenes to bring more and more things to the Python community news YouTube channel, newsletter, podcast, all those things. So don't worry, we're not taking time off. We're just taking time away to work on other things. So hopefully you'll have us in 2 weeks, even bigger and better than ever. But John, am I missing anything?
That's all I got for this week.
Oh, I guess there is one more thing. There were way more topics. We
Oh,
had
a
two
ton.
weeks 2 weeks worth of topics. If you might be wondering why we didn't cover them, well, we only had an hour. But if you want to hear about those topics, there are a few things that you can do, and I'm not going to give you all of them. Instead, I'm going to say go to pythoncommunitynews.com. Subscribe to the podcast. It's a lot of what you're hearing now, but there might be more stuff in the future. Subscribe to the newsletter. There's probably going to be a lot more stuff going on there. And also, we're going to be happy to tell you about any of the things that are coming up or changing. That's going to be the place to go. Also, we understand that social media right now is challenging. We have a Twitter account. It's at Pi Community News. Follow us there. I can't promise that we're going to be everywhere else. Right now, that's where we are. So if you want to get any social news, then that's where you kind of have to go there. But like I said, follow the website. The website will have links to all the pertinent information there. John, are we going to hang out and chat with folks afterwards, or are we wrapping it up here?
We got folks to hang out and chat with. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. In that case, well, I'm Jay,
I'm John.
and this has been the Python Community News. All right, folks. So John and I talked about this a little bit before, before the show and other times, but like we always have. PC is not responsible for the continued existence of Twitter. Yes, these are facts.
I accept no blame for that.
We tend to always have a really good conversation stem from the things that happen after we record the show for the podcast and all that stuff. So I wanted to just see and have an opportunity to chat with folks, and who knows, maybe this will become more of the show. It'll be the show that people actually come for, not like we'll talk about the news, but we really want to hear the hot and spicy takes, the stuff that we I mean, I guess we are saying it and recording it, but we're not saying it and distributing it that much out. All the people that don't care about our spicy takes, they've already left. But yeah, I'm interested, John. We didn't cover the Arduino thing. Like, is that a space that you're interested in personally?
This is the MicroPython
Yeah.
official builds. Yeah. Um, it's one of those things where I really want to be interested in it. I'm looking around my desk here. I recently picked up um, a pine sill soldering iron,
Okay.
which is a very compact little USB-C powered soldering iron, which is kind of uh, like I have these ambitions to do hardware stuff, but there's definitely some amount of barrier there of like it's not what I do my day to day, right? And it's not the um, right often not the quickest thing for me to reach for if I'm looking for a fun project to spend time on, just because it's not part of my normal workflow. But I could definitely see this being a thing that uh, reduces that barrier to entry for me. Um, in particular, there's I think a project I've been following for a long time is called the Open Book. It is an open source e-reader. Um,
That sounds cool.
it is super cool, and I think they're in the middle of like um, kind of a like big version update. So there are going to be a bunch of changes coming to right, the hardware and the software. But like they publish yeah. So it's that. There's also a GitHub repo that I'll drop in chat here. Um,
I
it's
gotcha.
right. Like I've been a fan of e-readers for a long time. I think I bought right the first model Kindle that came out. But it does kind of drive me nuts that I can't use a lot of this stuff uh, without being able to get what feel like should be like easy features, right? I don't want ads on my kind of sleep home screen. I want book covers on it, and there have been these like hacks for years of how do you do that um with your your Kindle or your Nook or whatever other device you're using. But like this is a project that really embraces that, right? You want to change how this thing works, then go do it. It's open source. And here are here are the plans for it. Here are the parts you need to buy and solder. And right, again, like not being a hardware tinkerer as much these days uh, as I would like to be. Um, Having more Python support in that kind of thing would really help me kind of again reduce that barrier, right? So uh, I don't have to learn 7 things at once. It's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I can follow the Python code that's going on, right? I'm not super concerned about that part. Now I have to figure out how to solder this thing without burning up the board.
Yeah. And I mean there's also the, I guess, the support of it all. Like, Adafruit, Arduino, these bigger names in kind of the hobby board space, they do give a level of not only credibility to it, but like support. Um, I am not the biggest person to dabble in anything other than like generic C Python. Not because I don't want to, but because, I mean, like you said, it's my job is mostly focused around that, so that's what I do. Even though, my boss, who maintains Pigeon, which is like a .NET compiler for Python, like maybe he would want me to, but I see this opportunity of, we often look at C Python as kind of the Python, but there are problems with that. I mean, you can't fit C Python on, or maybe you don't want to fit C Python on like a 1 gig memory card or a 256 meg or, 512 meg memory card that has to go into your little PCB. So how do you fix that? Well, you make MicroPython. You make, is it MyPy? Is that the one that I'm thinking of?
No,
You
MyPy is the static type checker.
Oh yeah, you're right. MyPy is a static
Um,
type checker. This is why we don't talk about things that you can pip install because Jay would mess it up. But like,
um, well, I mean, there's also the aspect of like right. Python has a reference implementation, right? C Python, and that's that kind of is the spec, right?
yes,
That's but I can't name any specific things that have come out of MicroPython and made their way into C Python, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that out that had happened. And if you look at one of the bigger um, uh, I'm struggling whether to call this a feature or an implementation detail. But
Mm,
that came about in I believe it was 3.6, was ordered dictionaries by default, right? So
mm.
um, in addition to being ordered, they're also smaller and faster, I believe. But um, that was a thing that was in PyPy for quite a while beforehand, I think. And
Yeah.
it was like, someone published a, right, here's how we could do this, and then PyPy picked that up as hey, this is a good default implementation for us, and eventually that got its way into CPython itself. And so, while the um, additional implementations of Python are not as focused on, when we, a lot of the time when we say Python, we mean CPython, right? um, that doesn't mean it doesn't affect the core of the language as a whole. And if you're going to say, hey, right, here are some changes that MicroPython has made in order to fit more of the standard library into a tiny device. um, cool, maybe that's stuff that eventually gets brought into CPython as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might have talked about this a little bit around like the Python 3.11 launch, but like a lot of the features that got introduced in 3.11 came from people collaborating and like talking about things that were built uh, behind closed doors, and the desire to make more of that public and in C Python itself, so that other people had access to them. I know like exception groups. When I interviewed Irit, like one of the big features of that was like the fact that they could have not just people from Microsoft, but people from like Meta and people from like Bank of America and Bloomberg and like all these bigger companies that have to do like not necessarily roll their own version of Python, but they have these really deep implementations and designs that have to be scalable because they're supporting billion-dollar companies. Like that's where a lot of the ideas for like exception groups came from, because there were 15 different ways to do it and people were doing it, and it was like, why don't we create one way to do it? It's built into the language so that everybody has access to it, and we all get together and discuss what is the best way to do that. That's one less development detail that now the average developer has to worry about. And kind of like you said, C Python isn't there aren't like five people sitting there saying like, and I mean I know that's how like the whole like steering committee and all that. So there are
I was going
there
to say
are
that there are specifically 5 people.
there are exactly five people, yes. But like they're not sitting there saying this is the decision that came out of my head, therefore we are now putting it out in the open. What they're saying is like all of these other ideas are coming from other languages, they're coming from other implementations of Python, and the more ways that you do that, the better, because what that does is that goes, oh, hey, one of the reasons why we had to develop it this way was because of this inherent flaw in CPython as it exists. What if that was gone? And here's an example of what that looks like in production. And that's where I think that like having CPython or having MicroPython being a part of like this thing that comes with Arduinos and like the Arduino labs by default becomes super beneficial, because now what you do is you say out of the box, you have access to this resource. Go do stuff. And the more stuff that gets done, the more people are able to see that and report back and contribute and collaborate and share all that content. So it does wind up back into the quote unquote main language. So I think that's going to be super cool, super important, and super impactful. Um, I don't know if you had another idea, because I do have a segue into one other topic that I want to bring your way, that I'm not going to bring the actual topic because it's from GitHub Universe and it's going to involve the dreaded C word, Copilot. But I'm gonna spin it. So Copilot did this Hey Copilot thing, and like it's basically voice activated Copilot, and the argument for doing it is to make writing code more accessible for developers. So the question that I have for you, John, is what is something that you think Python could do to increase the accessibility of the language?
Uh, that's a really good question that I
That you're
don't
hearing
think I have
for
an
the
answer
first
for.
time. Yeah.
Um,
I would be interested in chat too. Like if you have any idea of like what is something that you think makes like I already said it. Python is probably the most accessible programming language out there. Um, what can it do to be more accessible?
so I think the word accessible means a lot of things,
Yeah.
right? And Hey Copilot is right, the specific lens there is accessibility for
Motor skills like
yeah. So anyone who um, right would needs to or wants to code by voice instead of by uh, keyboard, right? That's the context there. Um, I won't claim to be remotely knowledgeable about accessibility from that standpoint. And I don't know that there's anything that Python could do for that, right? Because I don't know that right, language level tooling is going to be what helps there, right? It's right. Hey Copilot is uh, effectively global, right? It's this voice activated programming, so you're not limited by like specific syntax, right? That's not the it, it, so I guess I'm saying it's not being added like language by language. It's just and I don't know that it's um fundamentally new either, right? There have been voice enabled uh
we're not
text
we're not
input for a
putting
long time.
Copilot on trial. Like I'm more just saying
No,
like
no, I'm saying that uh right, these kinds of tools
yeah
are essentially like replacing the keyboard
yeah
in that workflow. And I don't know that Python, right, when I say Python I mean like C Python, or right, the people that steer it um could do much from that standpoint, because Python's not controlling your keyboard. Now, are there like things that could be included right in the standard library that would be uh uh right, here are, or I mean not even in the standard library necessarily, but like uh kind of developed and sort of officially recommended as like, hey, here are libraries for using right, these kinds of assistive technologies to make your programs more accessible as a whole.
mm-hmm.
Right, I could see that being a real thing. Another aspect is probably right, as much as it is great that right, Python has batteries included. Um, that means it's kind of big, right? Downloading Python. I'm gonna actually look this up because we have the internet, and that's a possibility here. Um, but if I go to download 311, um,
You're trying to see how big C Python is.
yeah, so I'm gonna pick like the let's say the Windows installer. That's probably the right most
The App Store install, like the Windows Store installer.
Uh, well, there's a Windows installer from
Yeah,
Python.org.
yeah, yeah, got you.
Um,
While you're doing that, my immediate answer was make idle better. Um, just
sure.
if it's the thing that comes with the language that if you're installing Python for the first time and you double click, oh hey, it added this thing to my computer. I'm going to click that. What does it do? And now I have blinking cursor. Like I could see like a rich library system, being added to that of, or even making it kind of feel more modern. That's one thing. I think also by doing that, you can do things like branch things out into windows, which give you like, or separate windows, which gives you some accessibility controls from like the system, which is kind of my other idea, which is I know that there is a third party module called accessibility that is for like macOS accessibility so that you can actually control that system. I don't know if it would be feasible, but I think I would like to see kind of some work put into interacting with the system accessibility at some level. And again, I know that that's kind of a challenge because one of the things Python tries to do is like operate in its own little space, separated from your environment in some way. But
Well,
I do think it
there
is
are plenty
possible.
of there are plenty of standard library things that have like specific OS implementations, though. I don't think that's I don't think that particular detail is a blocker here. I think the bigger thing there is like, I want to see the companies that make these things invest in it,
Yeah.
right? Like people jump through hoops to get uh, access to um, like internal APIs that anything developed outside of Apple HQ or I'm guessing that there are similar kinds of stories of Microsoft things too, um, implemented because right you have these. Uh, I'm thinking of some specific like features that like Safari is able to use right in
Mm,
terms of like power saving modes and things, which makes right Safari as a browser work uh, far more efficiently than other browsers do. And I don't know if this is still up to date knowledge, right? I might be talking about
yeah.
things that have been fixed, but right there are these things where companies kind of keep specific right implementation details under lock and key for like competitive advantage reasons. And
Yeah.
um, if instead they were like, hey, CPython, here is our implementation of the our bindings to the OS accessibility modules. Um, one, you avoid all of the like reverse engineering that has to go on. And two, I would say that um, that it helps everybody, right? It's not um, right. It doesn't have to be this like, oh, well, you use Swift or .NET or whatever because that gives you access to the magic accessibility modules that are only available through the officially endorsed programming languages. Um, I think there's a lot to be said for, hey, we contributed to this accessibility thing for the most popular programming language in the world, developed for our platform, because you get this for free out of the box.
Yeah.
And it, you talk to right the people behind Beware, and you say, hey, we contributed these accessibility things, and now here's how your tooling interacts with that. And there's I get frustrated, right? Because
No, John, you what? Oh.
it's it's a thing that feels like we could be a lot further along if it wasn't for um, what is anyone benefiting by hiding this stuff, right? Because I know
Yeah.
to enable some of the accessibility tooling on Mac OS, there's like um, kind of some hoops you have to jump through.
Oh yeah, no, it's rough.
You have
As
to like enable kernel modules and like to the point where, right, it might turn you off of using these tools just because it kind of looks scary if you're not like totally aware of what it all means under the hood.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's kind of one of the things that I'm thinking of really quick because Kojo had one. It's like, I guess this is sorry. This is for people not using Python. Some examples of how Python could help those people seems like a good idea. Reach out to different segments of the community and how they use Python in other ways than like software engineer here. I this is what I was talking about with that space of like, okay, the PSF shouldn't just be made up of software engineers because Python as a
Absolutely.
language is not just software engineers. There should be like dedicated spaces for not necessarily for every single segment of how you use Python, but I think that we can successfully say that like Python is relatively important in the scientific community. There should probably be representatives from the scientific community a part of the PSF. There should be web developers, there should be data scientists and machine learning specialists. There should be these, and maybe this is where you have those special, what is it called? The special committees. Maybe you have a
Like
committee for
special interest groups and
yeah,
working
and
groups and yeah, things like
I
that.
I do think that the PSF I think actually has that. I would have to check. They have like 8,000 special committees, so I don't know which
Yeah,
ones
I
they do
mean,
have and don't have.
I wouldn't argue that the data science community is underrepresented in Python. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
but that hasn't always been true.
Hmm.
Um, the the bigger uh, related, but from a like 90-degree different viewpoint um, that I see there, and Kojo's in the chat here, and uh, I'm probably stealing some stuff from talks he's given here. Is uh, it's not just right. We talk about the data science community and the web development community and the sysadmin community, and like that leaves out one, like the people who don't use this professionally at all,
Yeah,
right? And two, um, there's so much emphasis put on and I don't mean like within the PSF specifically. I mean kind of like broadly speaking, like, oh, so and so knows about has deep knowledge on the internals of this thing, so therefore they're the best person to make a decision about how that works, right? And like beginners get left out of that conversation a lot, right? Of like, if we're introducing this new syntax um or uh adding, right, suppose we were adding an accessibility library to the standard library, you end up you may end up kind of overemphasizing um the input from people who like already have the tools to do these things, right? And your goal really should be to make that more broadly available, right? Because as much as I would love to say, okay, well, Python has import accessibility and now everything works great. what's really going to happen is right, you're going to have all of these communities that already build this tooling. Those are the people who should be kind of guiding that, um, right, those interfaces, and right, like what their actual like pain points in development are, rather than um, just being like, oh, John knows Python, so John will design that thing. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it was one of those thoughts. I mean, more than anything, it gave me an opportunity to dunk on idle, because like idle just feels like people forgot about it. But I do think that, like, again, if you're starting Python for the first time, if you're not following some guide or some course, you're probably just going to click idle and be like, well, this is Python. What do I do with it? Um, but I do think that there are some really good, like, opportunities there to walk people through, not necessarily the getting started. Like, we don't need like a getting started like splash page or tip of the day in idle, but like I think that in some cases I would hope that the opening experience for most developers getting started is as accessible as possible. And I don't know this. I've never tried to open up idle and turn on a screen reader and be like, what is happening, or dictate to a screen reader and tell it kind of where to go or what to do. But I just, given the experience of using idle out of the box, I would almost be willing to bet that it's probably not the greatest.
So in a very related, in terms of the like tip of the day kind of thing, way, there was a keynote given at Pygotham a number of years ago that talked about, like, what does Python need to be doing to
Mm.
to facilitate growth, right? And one of the points that the speaker brought up was, go to, I don't know if this was actually the domain name at the time. I feel like it was something different, but right now it's try.ruby-lang.org, right? You get a browser window with a text box where you can type in Ruby and hit run, and it will execute that program and give you the output, right? And, like, sure, we have PyScript, we have what's the thing that it's built on? Pyodide?
Pyodide, yeah. Let's
Yeah.
say Pyodide. It solves all the Python problems. If I
Yeah,
say that
and like,
hyperbolically.
this is a keynote that was given at Pygotham in 2015, right? So, um, like, we don't have trypython.org yet,
Yeah.
right? And like, I think that there is, like, Python lends, or owes some of its popularity to the fact that it's just included on on
Some
Mac OS.
systems.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say Linux and Mac OS, but really Mac OS.
Yeah.
Um, and like, that's what's missing here. And there are tools now, right? You can go to Replit and
Yeah.
again, like PyScript, and there's a lot of stuff that can be done today, but it's not like, it's not that that low of a bar that it might be a thing you just, like, stumble on, right? You have to intentionally try Python. I guess
Yeah.
that's really what I'm getting at, is like,
Yeah. You have to make the
and
decision of, I am going to go try Python. And I
yes,
mean, you're talking about that, like, accessibility of it just being installed by default. That's not the case on Mac OS anymore.
Sure.
Yeah,
It was until like 2 years ago or something like
yeah,
that. But
yeah, recently.
like so I'm gonna point to. I'm moving the wrong way. I'm mirrored in my.
Yeah, yeah,
So behind me here, that is my Commodore 64, and there's this thing that has changed over in computing over the years, right? Is you used to have to like in order to use a computer, you had to learn about it,
yeah,
right? More so than you do today, right? And which is in general a good thing, right? Computing is uh, more generally accessible than it once was.
yeah,
But it also means that a lot of those implementation details are just kind of like hidden away, and um, I feel like it's harder to accidentally start programming
yeah.
than it than it used to be. And um, you know having trypython.org would be a big step in that direction.
Yeah, I want to bring this back up. First of all, shout out to Python by Night, big fan. Um, if there were accessible tooling for non-developers like business analysts, which I not to blow up their scene, but I know that Python by Night is a business analyst. To work with Excel or other reporting tools like Power BI and Tableau, where they could use like small Python scripts or Excel functions. Would non-developers be more willing to try a little Python? And Kojo is saying yes, they'd be more willing to try if it were easier to get it going. I think that this goes back to the conversation that you had, and I'm glad we're still recording because now I'm just like, we should just like, this should be the podcast again. But I think this goes back to what you were saying about if the companies were more, I don't want to say invested in the community, but they were more invested in working with the, the Python Steering Council and like the PSF to say like, how do we make this more integrated into what we're doing? Obviously, Python has, I'm not going to say they've won the data science battle, between Python and R. But they kind of have. Like there is more focus towards Python in that community now, even though, insert R developer here will give me all of the reasons why R is the superior choice or whatever. But like again, the ease of access, the ease of just trying, and the understanding that again up until the last couple of years, Python was installed by default and R wasn't, made it so much easier for people to just jump in and try it. So I do agree that I think if out of the box, not just with my actual, not just with the operating system, but with the tooling itself, I think that there would be a benefit to having them just naturally jump in and go. John had to do a thing really quick. He's going to be back. Kojo says, I say that as a former accountant who wanted to learn Python, so I found tools to let you use Python with Excel. Kojo, if I remember correctly, the first time I ever got to see one of your talks, it was about OpenPyXL, which is a tool that, I don't use every day, but I've definitely used before. There should be examples for people who want to become developers or who don't want to become developers who could still benefit from Python. So this is, I don't know if this is a PSF problem or like a popular code repository problem. I would love to see a code pen for Python. Like, I think that, and this might be kind of what John was mentioning, but I would really like to see a way for people to look at the code and say, I think this would solve the problem that I want. And, let's try this with this thing. And then have it run and be like, cool. And like, I could say, okay, this looks good. I want that. And then download it. And like you said, these are people who don't want to be developers. They just want to see Python utilized to help them do their job. And I mean, I feel like GitHub is not the answer. It's like It's like telling non-developers and nerd types to just spin up their own Mastodon, server. Like, yeah, that's going to solve your social media problems. No, no, it's not. It's going to create new problems. So I do think that while I don't think the PSF should be responsible for this, I do think that there would be a benefit to having kind of a data science code repository that, even if it's using Git on the backside of things, that is just like, hey, this thing does this thing. Check out this example here, run it interactively. And if you want to apply this to your project, you totally can. Here's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sort of, so I think a lot of larger companies will have someone in a role like that, and so I've been sort of that person from time to time of like, hey, I developed all of this stuff,
The
right?
Python builder, you're the automator.
Well, so it ends up being this like, oh, I built all of this in in Python, and all the files are on my laptop, and now I want to put it in production. How do I do that? Like, all right, let's take a step back. Like, we have to get all of this into, right, the company's standard source control and all of this sort of best practices stuff beforehand. And I mean, yeah, there are people who don't want to deal with that because that's not their, like, that's a right, something that gets in the way of doing their work rather than
Yeah.
than doing their work, right? Like, I will often take, right, specific measures to make right, Git commits pretty self-contained and things like that. And I think part of that is like, well, I've been in the situation of like having to debug something because it broke and I was on call, and now I need to understand, right, when this change went out as like a self-contained Git commit rather than 75 commits on one PR that say update, 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 right? And it's,
Yeah.
so people are going to do the things that make their their day-to-day, whether that's their job or their hobby or whatever, more manageable for them. And right, not everybody needs to be a Git expert,
Yeah.
or
I mean,
not everyone should have to be a Git expert.
There should be one in the group. Like, between the two of us, I'm not that person.
But I wanted to mention, and I think this is a super interesting point about reducing friction and getting started. But the Excel thing,
Yeah.
I am really struggling to find this. At some point, I want to say it was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There was to some level unofficial announcement that Python was going to be supported in Excel.
Oh, there was?
And I don't know if it was like an actual like published post, or I mean, I assume it couldn't have been that, because it would have been like way too far in the development process to have not happened if that was the case. But it might have been like some news site reports that insiders say, but there was some notion of being like, yeah, you're going to be able to use Python in your Excel cells now. And I was looking for that for like 10 minutes. And like, yeah, that would be huge.
So I can only I don't know. I don't work in the office part of Microsoft. Microsoft is big. There's lots of big parts to it. This is a thing that comes up from time to time of like, hey, how could we do that? Would people be willing to test? Some people have ideas, like, and the answer is always yes. Like, absolutely, let's do this. Like, Excel is an esport. Like, we can, at this point, like, that would be a big boost to, if anything, Python street cred. If you're at the Excel games and someone goes and enters some Python script, I think that would be good.
And I was pretty close. This is 4 years and 11 months ago. So,
Yeah,
um,
Python Anywhere started as a Python and Excel experiment.
hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I like I said, I disclosure, I work for Microsoft. They make Excel. I don't know anything on that space, but it has it comes up from time to time about like, hey, we should make it easier for people to use Python and Excel. That's
Well,
something that I've had in my meetings at least.
and I mean, I can tell you day one, right? There's going to be like, hey, look, here's a developer preview, and somebody's going to be like, I embedded PyTorch in Excel. All right, well, the computer's not going to work for a while, but that was a fun experiment. Um, but from a so I've done a decent amount of like kind of ETL style work, right? Of like we get data from some third party that has to ultimately get into systems to get served up by an API,
Yeah.
right? And in certain sectors, uh, more sectors than not, Excel is that format,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
like having better tooling for that would be useful from that standpoint, but also um, it would allow me to be like um, I would be able to like go over to the the folks in those like business analyst roles and be like, okay, we're gonna work together on this, and we're gonna stop like sending these files back and forth. Like, let me know what you need, in this particular spreadsheet you're working on, and like I can help with that, so we reduce the like 80% of round trip of being like calling all these different APIs just to be able to get the result of a Python function into an Excel file.
Yeah. And I mean, import CSV is not the answer. That's what we know is import
I mean,
CSV.
CSV is pretty good Python module, but it's not the same thing as using Excel, right? Like,
Yeah.
because that's not the goal here. It's not just I want to be able to um
Oh man.
to like share around this uh static file. It's you want to be able to use um Python in place of existing macros.
Yeah. I feel you. I like this conversation. I like the direction that it went, and I definitely want to make sure that we clip a lot of this stuff out for maybe some other episodes. But
I think there is a clip somewhere of Python is going to be officially supported by Excel, and that's the clip. That's the
I don't know where that is.
I just said it. It's there now.
You're not trapping me. Like,
Um,
that ain't me. I did not, as an employee of Microsoft, I did not say these things. Nah.
but yeah, I mean, like, in Excel, in Python Anywhere, I'll be honest, I can't remember the last time I even launched idle. I don't have anything against idle. I just like I don't use it, and
Yeah.
and I don't see people recommend it really. Um,
They actively recommend that you don't do it. Like that's the thing, and that's what I mean with like that should be changed. I mean, granted, yes, if you're doing a lot of Python development, you should not be using idle. Idle is designed to give you something to use Python with. But I do think that we can improve what that something is, and at least make it so that it's not like, I feel like idle is almost, and again, I'm not speaking, this is not my personal opinion, but I could see how people see it as idle is an embarrassment of like, oh, let me use Python for the first time. Oh, this interface is terrible. I don't want to use Python if it means I have to use this. And then we have to go out of our way to explain, well, no, you don't have to use this. This is just something that we give you. It's whatever. Like, if we changed that and made that first time experience with Python sticky and like a good experience just visually, I think that would help with leaps and bounds. I do
Well,
want to I do
well,
want to. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
VS Code is Electron, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why is try.python.org not an embedded VS Code running against like PyScript? And now, now you have.
You're giving me work, John.
I am giving you work. I know you know all these people.
Let me just jump on Teams real quick,
Yeah.
and I'm sure Brett Cannon
dial him
loves
in.
that idea. Like,
Get him on the show. It's. I mean, if you're on the West Coast, it's not that late.
yeah.
It's still the workday. Um,
I
but
did want to take a second, just so that we can. Well, we got to wrap it up at some point because you and I still have like admin stuff that we got to do and all that. But people in the chat, see, this was fun. This was great. We had people in there. They knew some things. They had some ideas. They shared it with us. Our hope is that we can have more of that in the show. Like I said, the part that we don't record is always better than the part that we tend to record, which is why we just chose to record it this time. We want your opinion on this stuff. If you like this type of conversation, then we want to bring that conversation. We'll bring the other stuff too, but like, we're taking this time to think about like how we can bring the best content to the people that are going to show up in the stream and people that are going to show up and watch the videos later and all this other stuff. Help us with that. Tell us what you want. And I mean, obviously we can't bring Excel, we can't bring Python to Excel, but we can bring up those discussions. Like, I think it's totally a valid discussion, something that we can, it'd make for good content on the show. But thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Yeah, I think it's gonna do it for the show. I'm gonna cut the stream there.
yeah. Again, quick reminder: we're off next week
Yeah.
due to the holiday in the U.S., but we'll be back again in 2.
Yeah. So we'll see you in a couple weeks.